October 1997. A family of four checks into a roadside motel off Highway 281 in Central Texas. They never check out. Their car remains in the parking lot, their luggage still inside the room. But the family? Gone. The only clue: a crumpled gas station receipt, time-stamped at 3:15 a.m., found in the motel trash can. Tonight, we're unraveling the motel receipt, a story of disappearances, deception, and the secrets that bury themselves deep in the Texas dirt. If you're drawn to unsolved mysteries, forgotten crimes, and the stories that keep investigators awake at night, make sure you subscribe. The desert air carried a dry chill that clung to the skin, the kind of cold that came only after a sweltering Texas day had finally surrendered to night. The Red Oak Motel stood alone against the backdrop of Highway 281, its sun-faded sign blinking half-heartedly. Only two letters still glowed reliably: M and O. To drivers speeding north or south, it looked less like a place of rest than a warning. But on October 11th, 1997, the Halverson family didn't have many options. The father, Robert, was a dentist from Waco. He had driven all day with his wife, Denise, and their two children, 12-year-old Tyler and 8-year-old Emily. They were headed toward San Antonio for a family gathering, but the children had grown restless, and Denise's head throbbed with the dull migraine that always came during long drives. Robert decided to stop for the night. The motel clerk remembered them, a tall man with tired eyes, a polite wife who asked for extra towels, and two kids who clutched fast food cups as if they were prized possessions. They checked into room 6, paid in cash, and disappeared behind a flimsy door that locked with more trust than security. That was the last confirmed sighting. By morning, the beds in room 6 were untouched. The television was off. Their bags were still neatly stacked in the corner, toothbrushes still in their travel cases. Their SUV sat quietly in the parking lot, dew collecting on its hood. It was the housekeeper who noticed first. She knocked twice. No answer. She assumed the family had gone for breakfast, but when hours passed and the vehicle remained, unease stirred. She reported it to the manager, who finally entered the room. Empty, silent. The police were called, reports were taken, but the motel was not known for its cameras, and the night clerk swore he never saw them leave. The only object that seemed out of place was a gas station receipt, stuffed deep into the wastebasket. It was dated October 12th, 3:15 a.m., from a station 49 miles south. The signature at the bottom matched Robert's handwriting. That single piece of paper became the beginning and the end of the official trail. For years, the disappearance of the Halverson family remained one of Texas's quiet mysteries, overshadowed by louder crimes and larger tragedies. The motel shut down in 2003. The sign collapsed in a storm 2 years later. By then, only the locals remembered that a family had once walked into room 6 and never walked out. But in 2021, the case found its way back into the light. A developer preparing to bulldoze the abandoned property discovered something strange buried behind the motel. A locked metal box, rusted shut, with documents inside that didn't belong to the motel at all. Inside was another gas station receipt, same date, same time, but from a different location 40 miles away. And this one wasn't signed. The discovery raised an impossible question. How could the same family be in two places at once? The investigation reopened. The motel's shadows stirred again. And what surfaced wasn't just about one family. It was about a string of vanishings that stretched far longer and deeper than anyone had imagined. The truth had been waiting, buried in the dust of a forgotten motel, for decades. The Red Oak Motel had been shuttered for nearly 2 decades, yet it still exhaled a faint odor of cigarette smoke and mildew each time the wind pressed against its broken windows. Plastic "No Vacancy" letters hung crookedly across the sign, their red paint faded to a bruised pink. The highway roared just beyond the tree line, carrying 18-wheelers and travelers who no longer noticed the forgotten property. Detective Claire Whitfield stepped carefully through the weeds that had grown waist-high around the office door. The sun was sinking, throwing the building into fractured shadows. Her boots crunched against gravel, and each sound echoed through the emptiness like a reminder that she shouldn't be here alone. But she wasn't. A deputy followed close behind, hauling a steel crowbar. Behind them, a city-hired contractor tugged nervously at his gloves. He was the one who had called earlier that week, his voice unsteady as he described finding something strange while clearing brush. The discovery had been a rusted lockbox, half buried near the back lot, where the motel's dumpster used to stand. Inside, beneath crumbling paper and rust flakes, lay documents that didn't belong: gas receipts, credit card slips, and a folded motel registration card not from Red Oak, but from a different property 3 counties over. And on the edge of one of those receipts was a familiar name: Halverson. Claire had been a rookie when the Halverson disappearance first broke across central Texas. She remembered the grainy newspaper photo, a smiling family of 4, the children clutching ice cream cones outside their father's dental office. She remembered the endless speculation: cartel, cult, witness protection gone wrong, and the silence that followed when no answers came. Now, standing in the brittle weeds of the Red Oak, Claire felt the weight of unfinished business pressing against her chest. The contractor gestured toward the office door. "That's where I found the box," he said, "wedged behind some old concrete blocks." The deputy wedged the crowbar under the swollen wood frame and heaved. The door surrendered with a groan, releasing a rush of stale air. Inside, the office looked like a place where time had stopped, but decay had carried on without permission. A rotary phone sat on the counter, its cord frayed and stiff. The check-in bell was still there, green with corrosion. Behind the desk, a wall calendar curled at the edges, frozen on October 1997. Claire pulled on latex gloves and moved behind the counter. Dust coated everything like fine ash. She found a logbook beneath the counter, its cover warped by humidity. When she opened it, the pages stuck together, but legible names remained. She flipped carefully until she reached the right date: October 11th, 1997. And there it was, in faded ink: Halverson, room 6, paid cash. The air in the room thickened. The deputy leaned over her shoulder. "That's the last entry for that night." Claire nodded slowly. She knew the old reports by heart. Room 6 had been searched, photographed, sealed, and eventually stripped. Nothing had been found except that single gas receipt. Yet here they were, decades later, with new evidence surfacing from the dirt. She set the logbook down and stepped back, letting her eyes travel across the office. Something about the silence unnerved her. It wasn't just abandonment. It was watchfulness, as though the motel itself remembered what had happened. The contractor shifted nervously. "Detective, are you saying this could really be them?" After all these years? Claire didn't answer right away. She thought of Denise Halverson's sister, who still lived in Waco and had never stopped leaving flowers at an empty cemetery plot. She thought of the 2 children, their school photos frozen forever at ages 8 and 12. "Let's secure the site," she finally said. "We'll bring in forensic techs tomorrow." But as she spoke, her gaze drifted to the corner of the office, where a filing cabinet sat tilted against the wall. Rust streaked its sides, and the bottom drawer was warped by moisture. She crouched, tugged gently, and to her surprise, the drawer slid open. Inside were dozens of envelopes, motel receipts, gas station slips, names she didn't recognize. Some dated back to the 80s, some with no dates at all. But one in particular caught her attention. It was a thin yellow carbon copy, folded neatly in half. The print was faint but legible. Fuel purchase 3:15 a.m., October 12th, 1997. Southbound 281. But this wasn't the receipt already in evidence. This was from another station 40 miles east, and the name scrawled at the bottom wasn't Halverson. It was Holloway. Claire felt the hair rise on her arms. The Halverson receipt had always been considered the family's final footprint. But what if it wasn't unique? What if someone had been fabricating receipts, creating false trails, long before 1997? The deputy noticed her expression. "What is it?" She slid the paper into an evidence sleeve. "It means we've been looking at this all wrong." Outside, the last light bled from the horizon, leaving the Red Oak Motel in shadow. The neon sign flickered once more before surrendering to darkness, and as the wind swept through the broken windows, it almost sounded like a whisper. The evidence lab smelled faintly of disinfectant and printer ink. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, their white glow flattening everything into sterile surfaces. Detective Claire Whitfield stood at the counter, watching as a forensic technician laid out the items from the Red Oak Motel on fresh sheets of butcher paper. Each artifact was tagged: the brittle motel logbook, the stack of old receipts, the faded registration card from another county, and the one that had pulled her attention like a magnet, the second gas station slip. The technician adjusted his glasses and leaned in. "This paper's degraded, but not in the same way as the motel logbook. See the edges? Slightly burned. Someone tried to age it artificially, maybe with heat." Claire studied the slip. "But the print looks authentic." "It probably is. Could have been stolen from a real station. But the signature's different. Whoever wrote this wasn't Halverson." Claire felt a prickle along her spine. "Holloway," she said the name slowly, as if tasting it. The technician nodded. "Not a customer we've ever linked to that station, though. We'll cross-check with their archived records, if they exist." Claire knew this could take weeks. The original investigation in 1997 had focused narrowly on the Halverson family, not on any broader pattern. One receipt, one night, one missing family. Case closed in silence. But now she saw the possibility of something larger. A deliberate weaving of false trails, receipts scattered like breadcrumbs to nowhere. She straightened. "Catalog everything. I want digital scans sent to Austin by tonight." The technician looked surprised. "You think this goes higher?" "I think we've been chasing ghosts for 24 years, Claire said. And maybe it wasn't just one family. 2 hours later, she was back in her car, heading north on I-35. The city lights bled into the night like a halo of fireflies, but Claire's thoughts were far from the road. She remembered being 23, fresh out of the academy, when she first saw the Halverson case file. She had been told not to obsess. Cold cases stay cold for a reason, but she had read every page. The photographs of room 6, the receipt in the trash. The SUV parked outside, keys still on the nightstand. She remembered how the silence around the case had grown heavier each year until people stopped mentioning it. The family faded into whispers, then into nothing at all. Now, after 2 decades, the motel had spat up something new. A rusted box, a false trail, another name. It was as if the dirt itself wanted the truth unearthed. Her phone buzzed in the cup holder. She answered without taking her eyes off the highway. "Whitfield." "Detective, it's Mason from the county archives." His voice carried the weariness of too many years in windowless rooms. "I've pulled every record we had on the Red Oak." "You're not going to like this." Claire tightened her grip on the wheel. "Go ahead." The property changed ownership 4 times between 1985 and 2003. Each time, the owner listed cash-only purchases of furniture, appliances, even cars. No tax trails, no legitimate bank records. The motel was a money pit on paper, but someone kept funneling cash through it. "Front business," Claire murmured. "Looks that way. And get this. There are 3 other missing persons cases linked by geography. 1989. A traveling salesman vanished off 281. 1993, a mother and child disappeared after stopping for gas 20 miles south. 1996, a college student never made it back from San Marcos. All last seen within 10 miles of the Red Oak. Claire's chest tightened. Patterns had been there all along, hiding in plain sight. "Send me everything," she said. "Tonight." By the time she reached her apartment, it was after midnight. The building smelled faintly of fried onions from the takeout place downstairs. Claire set her keys on the counter, fed her cat, and spread the case files across her kitchen table. The photographs of the Halversons stared back at her. Robert, smiling with professional pride. Denise, her arm around her daughter. Tyler with his uneven haircut. Emily with front teeth just beginning to grow in. Claire studied their faces as if they might whisper the truth to her. She pulled the new receipt from its evidence sleeve. Holloway. The handwriting looped oddly, like someone imitating a signature without ever having practiced it. She tried to imagine the scene. 3:15 a.m., a gas station fluorescent against the dark. Robert Halverson signing one receipt. Someone else, Holloway, signing another at the same moment. 2 receipts for one night. 2 trails leading away from one place. Claire leaned back, exhaustion pressing against her skull. The motel was never just about cheap rooms and neon lights. It had been something darker, something patient, a place where families could vanish without a ripple. She thought of the housekeeper who had found room 6 empty. She thought of the night clerk who had sworn he never saw the family leave. Where were they now? Alive? Dead? Did they remember more than they had admitted? A knock startled her. Sharp, deliberate. She froze, glancing at the clock. 12:42 a.m. No one knocked at this hour. She approached the door cautiously, every muscle alert. Peered through the peephole. An older woman stood in the hallway, her hair gray and uncombed, her coat buttoned wrong. She looked directly into the peephole as though she knew Claire was watching. Claire opened the door an inch. "Can I help you?" The woman's voice was hoarse. "You're looking into the Halversons." Claire's breath caught. "Who are you?" "Someone who should have spoken up years ago." The woman's eyes glistened in the dim hallway light. "I worked that motel, and I saw them leave." Claire gripped the edge of the door. For 24 years, the official record had insisted no one saw the Halverson family walk out of room 6. But now, at nearly 1 in the morning, a witness had come knocking. The woman's coat smelled faintly of mothballs and cold air as she stepped into Claire's apartment. She moved with stiff hesitation, as if every step was a decision made reluctantly. Claire closed the door behind her, instinctively locking it again. "Sit if you'd like," Claire offered, gesturing to the small kitchen table cluttered with case files. The woman lowered herself into a chair, her hands trembling slightly. "My name's Marlene Eckhart. I cleaned rooms at the Red Oak from '92 until it closed. Nights, mostly. Cheaper shifts. My husband—" She broke off, pressing her lips tightly together before continuing. "He didn't want me working at all." But bills pile up. Claire sat across from her, pen ready. "Marlene, you said you saw the Halversons leave." Marlene's eyes flicked to the photographs on the table. Robert, Denise, Tyler, and Emily. Frozen forever in 1997. Her face softened, then tightened. "I remember that night clear as day," she whispered. "It was quiet. Hardly any guests. Couple truckers, a salesman in room 4. I was folding linens in the back office when I saw the family come out of room 6. Claire leaned forward. "What time?" "Close to 3 in the morning. I remember because the office clock ticked so loud when I realized I was alone in there. They were walking fast. The father had the little girl in his arms. The boy kept stumbling like he was half asleep. The mother carried nothing, just kept looking over her shoulder." Claire's pulse quickened. Over her shoulder at what? Marlene swallowed hard. "At the man behind them." The words hung in the room like smoke. Claire steadied her voice. "Describe him." "I never saw his face. He wore a ball cap low, jacket zipped up, but he wasn't one of the guests. I knew all the cars that night. His wasn't parked out front. He walked right behind them, not touching them, but close enough. Too close. And then, they all got into the Halversons' SUV, drove off toward the highway, but the father wasn't driving. The man in the cap was Claire scribbled furiously, every detail a fracture against the official record. Why didn't you tell police in '97? Marlene's hands tightened around the edge of the table. Because the next night, there was an envelope waiting in my locker. No note. Just $500 cash. Claire stared at her. You thought it was hush money? I knew it was. My husband found it too. Said nothing good would come from stirring trouble. He burned the envelope. Told me to keep my mouth shut if I wanted to keep working. Her voice cracked. And I did. For years. I thought maybe I'd imagined it. Maybe I was tired or dreaming. But I still see their faces every time I close my eyes. Claire set her pen down, letting silence settle. She knew the kind of fear that grew roots, the kind that kept people quiet for decades. But Marlene's details rang with something real, something unshakable. Do you remember anything else? The SUV, maybe. Marlene nodded slowly. Yes, one thing. The rear license plate light was out. I'd noticed it earlier that evening walking past. When they pulled out, it was still dark. Claire felt the old case files humming in her mind. None of the reports had mentioned the SUV being seen leaving. None had listed the plate light detail. This was new. This was alive. Marlene's eyes shone with sudden desperation. Detective, you can't let them think I'm talking. If someone was watching back then, they might still be watching now. Claire reached across the table, resting her gloved hand lightly near Marlene's trembling fingers. You did the right thing coming here. No one else needs to know tonight was our conversation. Marlene exhaled shakily, as though releasing 24 years of silence. I'll give you a statement, but not at the station. Too many eyes. I'll write it down. You'll have it by the end of the week. Claire nodded, though her instincts screamed to push harder, to extract everything now. But pressure could collapse fragile trust, and Marlene had carried this secret like a stone in her chest for decades. When the woman finally left, disappearing into the midnight hallway, Claire remained at the table. The photographs stared at her, the receipts whispered of false trails, and now, finally, there was movement in the stagnant air of 1997. She picked up the phone and dialed the number for the county dispatch. This is Detective Whitfield. I need traffic reports from October 12th, 1997. Any mention of a dark SUV with a faulty plate light, heading southbound on 281 between midnight and 4 a.m., and widen the search. Small towns, county sheriffs, anyone who kept notes. The dispatcher hesitated. That'll be a lot of digging. Claire's voice was steady. Then start digging. She hung up and sat back, staring at the evidence spread across her kitchen. The motel had kept its secrets, but not forever. Witnesses still breathed. Receipts still existed. And somewhere on that highway, in the stretch of dark between the Red Oak Motel and a vanished gas station, the Halverson family had disappeared into the hands of a man no one had ever named. Claire closed her eyes, imagining the SUV pulling away from the motel, the children half asleep, Denise clutching nothing but fear, Robert silent in the passenger seat, and behind the wheel, a man whose face no one had ever seen. The diner sat just off the county road, its neon sign buzzing faintly in the early morning dark. Claire slid into a booth with a steaming mug of coffee, the vinyl seat cracked beneath her. She had barely slept, but exhaustion sharpened her focus more than dulled it. Across from her sat Deputy Ruiz, a young officer with wide shoulders and the restless energy of someone still new to law enforcement. He had pulled the overnight duty of combing through archives, and now he carried a manila folder stuffed with photocopies. You were right, he said, sliding the folder across. There was a traffic report from October 12th, 1997. Sheriff's deputy down in Blanco County pulled over an SUV matching the Halversons. No plate light, about 3:40 a.m. Claire's chest tightened. And Ruiz shook his head. No ticket. No official record in the database. Just a note scribbled in the back of his logbook. Says the driver handed over a license, but the name was smudged from rain. Deputy waved them on. Smudged, Claire repeated, her tone flat. Yeah, rain shower came through around then, light but enough to soak paper. Deputy thought nothing of it. Claire sipped her coffee, bitterness cutting through fatigue. So the last confirmed sighting wasn't a gas station receipt. It was a roadside stop. And the driver wasn't Robert Halverson. Ruiz hesitated. What if it was? Maybe Robert was driving and just looked off. Claire shook her head firmly. Marlene saw the man in the cap driving. She had no reason to lie. And if Robert was behind the wheel at 3:40, why was there hush money waiting for her the next day? Ruiz didn't answer. He didn't have to. Later that afternoon, Claire drove the 30 miles south to Blanco County herself. The sheriff's office was a squat brick building that smelled faintly of pine cleaner. Deputy Harold Keene, retired now, had agreed to meet her. He was a wiry man in his 70s, with eyes that looked like they had never stopped scanning the horizon. He sat across from her in a conference room, hands folded over a worn cap. I remember that night, he said before she could ask. Not many vehicles on 281 at that hour. Dark SUV caught my eye when I saw the plate light was out. Claire leaned in. Tell me about the driver. Keene closed his eyes briefly, as though conjuring the memory. Tall fella. Cap pulled low. Didn't say much. Just handed over his license quick-like, muttered something about traveling with his family. I shined my flashlight inside. Saw kids asleep in the back, a woman staring straight ahead. Something about her eyes stuck with me, wide, scared. But I told myself I was imagining it. Claire's stomach tightened. And the license? Looked like Halverson, but the rain had smeared the ink. I didn't have a camera on me back then. Figured it was just a tired father on a late-night drive. He looked down at his hands. I waved them on. God help me, I waved them on. Silence pressed heavy between them. Claire could feel the man's guilt radiating across the table, years of weight unspoken. You couldn't have known, she said gently. Keene's eyes glistened. But I should have. I knew something was wrong. I saw it in that woman's face, and I let them vanish right there in front of me. That night, Claire drove the same stretch of 281. The sky was clear, stars scattered across the dark like salt on black velvet. She slowed near the mile marker Keene had described. The highway was empty now, but she imagined it. The SUV pulled over, headlights cutting weak cones into the rain, children asleep in the back seat, Denise Halverson frozen in terror. She pulled over, put her car in park, and sat in silence. The night felt vast, the road endless. It was easy to believe people could simply disappear here, swallowed whole by the dark. Her phone buzzed. A text from Ruiz. Found something in the receipts. The name Holloway shows up in another missing persons case. 1989. Sending details. Claire stared at the message, the words burning on the screen. Another case, another false trail. The receipts weren't just random scraps. They were part of a pattern, a web stretched across decades, designed to scatter investigators, to erase families without leaving clean edges. She whispered into the dark car, "Who were you, Holloway?" The night offered no answer. The following morning, Claire spread new files across her desk at the station. Ruiz had delivered. Case, Daniel Holloway. Traveling salesman. Last seen 1989. His car abandoned near the same corridor of Highway 281. A gas receipt in his name dated the night of his disappearance. But no body ever found. No suspect ever named. Claire's hands shook as she laid the Halverson receipt beside it. 2 families, 8 years apart, tied not by blood but by paper. The motel was more than a backdrop. It was the axis where lives spun into silence. She leaned back, exhaustion pulling at her eyes, but her mind ran hot. Someone had been orchestrating this for decades, planting trails, using receipts like signatures. And if Holloway's trail ended here, maybe so had others. The Red Oak wasn't just a motel. It was a trap. That evening, Claire returned home to find another envelope slipped under her door. No note, no handwriting. Just paper. Inside were photographs. Black and white, grainy. One showed the Halversons, loading luggage into their SUV outside the motel. Another, a blurred figure in a cap walking behind them. And a third, Claire's chest tightened, was of herself, from the night before, standing beside her car on the highway shoulder, staring into the dark. Her hands trembled as she held the photo. Whoever had been watching the Halversons in 1997 was still watching now, and they knew she was getting too close. Claire didn't sleep. The photographs lay spread across her kitchen table, their grainy black and white shadows seeping into every corner of her apartment. The first showed the Halversons at the motel. The second, the man in the cap. But it was the third that wouldn't let her breathe. Her own figure, frozen in the frame of last night, standing beside her car on the shoulder of 281. She remembered the silence of that stretch of road, the stars scattered like broken glass. She had thought she was alone. Now she knew better. Someone had been close enough to take the shot without her noticing, close enough to watch, close enough to know she was retracing the Halversons' path. She forced herself to gather the photos, sliding them into an evidence sleeve with hands that trembled despite her effort to stay steady. She needed to think like an investigator, not like prey. Whoever had left them wanted her unsettled, and it was working. By sunrise, she was back at the station, Ruiz already waiting with coffee and eyes still heavy from lack of sleep. "Detective," he frowned as she handed him the envelope. "Someone dropped this at my apartment." No note. Ruiz flipped through the photographs, his face tightening. "They're watching you." "Yes," Claire said flatly. "The same way they watched the Halversons." Ruiz leaned forward. "Then they're still active." After all these years, Claire didn't answer. She studied the photo of the man in the cap again. His face was turned just enough to blur into shadow, as if hiding from the camera itself. But the posture, the nearness to the family, it radiated ownership. "Run the paper stock on these," she told Ruiz. "Figure out if they're old prints or recent." "If they're recent, we have a serious problem." Ruiz hesitated. "And if they're old?" Claire slid the photo back into the envelope. "Then we have an even bigger problem." The next lead came not from evidence, but from memory. Marlene's words echoed in Claire's head. The father had the girl in his arms, the boy stumbling, the mother looking back. If Marlene had seen that, then someone else might have too. Motels were not solitary places. Someone else might have been awake, restless, peering out through the blinds. Claire dug through the old case file again. One guest had been staying in room 4 that night, a salesman named Douglas Kerr. Interviewed once, dismissed as irrelevant. He had told investigators he slept through the night. But people's stories changed after decades. Douglas Kerr lived now in a small house on the outskirts of San Marcos, his yard crowded with rusting tools and a swing set bleached by the sun. Claire found him on the porch, a man in his late 60s with a face worn by too many cigarettes and too little rest. He eyed her badge. "Police again?" "I told them everything back then." "I think you left something out," Claire said evenly. Kerr's gaze flicked past her as though measuring the distance to escape. "It was a long time ago." "You were in room 4, Claire pressed, "the night the Halversons disappeared. Do you really expect me to believe you slept through everything? No cars starting, no doors slamming?" Silence stretched. Kerr's jaw worked, then loosened. "I heard them," he admitted finally. "Voices. Footsteps. That little boy crying. I didn't want to get involved. Wasn't my business." Not back then. Claire's pulse raced. "You saw them leave?" "No." Kerr shook his head. "Just heard." And then he stopped, his hand trembling as he lifted a cigarette. There was another sound. Heavy, like something being dragged. Claire froze. "Dragged?" He nodded quickly, eyes darting away. "Didn't sound right." I pulled the curtains an inch. Saw the father, Robert, you called him, slumped against the man in the cap, like he couldn't walk on his own. The kids were already in the car. The wife, she kept looking at the office like she wanted to scream but couldn't. Claire's stomach knotted. Kerr had been a witness all along. "Why didn't you tell police?" Kerr's laugh was bitter. "Because the next day I found a receipt slipped under my windshield wiper. Same station, same date as theirs, except it had my name on it. I'd never been to that station in my life. But there it was, proof I had." He pulled open a tin box beside him and slid out a brittle piece of paper. The ink was faint, but legible. Gas receipt. October 12th, 1997. Signed, Douglas Kerr. Claire's breath caught. "You kept it." "Of course I kept it." It was a threat, a way of saying, "We can put you anywhere we want." So I shut up. Her hands trembled as she sealed the new receipt in an evidence bag. It was confirmation of everything she had feared. The receipts weren't mistakes. They were tools of control, planted on witnesses to keep them silent, to rewrite the story. And whoever had been planting them had been meticulous, patient, powerful. Driving back toward Austin, Claire gripped the wheel so tightly her knuckles ached. The Halversons had never vanished cleanly. They had been erased, their traces overwritten with receipts and silence. Witnesses bribed, intimidated, falsified into compliance. But now those witnesses were cracking. Her phone buzzed again. A text from Ruiz. Photographs printed recently. Paper stock from the last 5 years. Someone's active. Careful. Claire felt a chill climb her spine. Whoever had haunted the Red Oak Motel wasn't gone. They were watching her. And if history repeated itself, she wasn't just investigating the disappearance of one family anymore. She was stepping straight into the same trap that had swallowed them. Rain streaked the station's windows in silver threads, blurring the city lights beyond. Claire sat hunched at her desk, a wall of receipts, photographs, and handwritten notes spreading across the corkboard in front of her. The pattern was undeniable now. 1989, Daniel Halloway. Disappeared with his car. A gas receipt later found with his name. 1993. A mother and child near Marble Falls. A duplicate motel receipt surfaced in the file years later. 1996. A college student vanishing between San Marcos and Austin. A diner slip that bore her name, though she'd never been there. 1997. The Halverson family. Receipts multiplying like weeds, rewriting the trail. 4 cases, all within a 30-mile corridor of Highway 281. All tied somehow to paper trails that bent reality. Claire pressed her hands against her temples. The receipts weren't random artifacts. They were weapons. Whoever wielded them knew how to plant doubt, how to fracture truth until it couldn't be trusted. Her eyes drifted to the photograph of the man in the cap, blurred, faceless, a figure who had existed for decades without ever being named. The rain outside intensified, a low percussion against glass. It made the room feel smaller, as if the storm itself were listening. By noon, Ruiz returned with files balanced in his arms and an expression that flickered between excitement and fear. He dropped the stack onto her desk. "Property records," he said. "Not just the Red Oak. 3 other motels, same era, all along 281. They changed hands constantly, always cash sales, No paper trails worth a damn. Guess what connects them? Claire leaned forward, heart pounding. Tell me. Ruiz tapped the top file. They all shared the same maintenance contractor. A company called Mid-South Services, registered to a P.O. box in Waco. No phone number, no real address. Just invoices for plumbing, electrical, cleaning. Every motel signed with them. And every motel sat at the center of a disappearance Claire's breath caught. So it wasn't about one place. It was a circuit, Ruiz nodded grimly. And someone was moving through it, erasing people as they went. The weight of it pressed against Claire's chest. Not a lone predator. Not a single night gone wrong. A system, patient and deliberate, like a spider weaving web after web across decades. Get me every record tied to Mid-South Services, she ordered. Shell companies, bank statements, anything. Ruiz hesitated. Detective, if this is organized, we're not chasing a ghost anymore. We're poking at something bigger than county cases. Claire met his eyes. Then let's see who pokes back. That night, she drove south again, the rain easing into mist as the highway unspooled in front of her. She needed to see the places herself, not just in files. The Red Oak Motel was gone now, bulldozed into gravel years ago, but its lot remained barren, a scar on the roadside. Claire parked at the edge, headlights cutting across weeds and broken asphalt. She stepped out into the damp air. The ground smelled of wet dirt and rust. She imagined the neon sign once buzzing here, the families checking in, the children running to vending machines. She imagined the Halversons pulling into room 6, unaware the night was already written for them. Her stomach knotted. She felt the motel's absence as a presence, the way an empty stage still holds the echo of voices. She closed her eyes, and in the dark, she heard it. Not sound, but memory. Doors opening, children crying, the drag of something heavy. Her eyes snapped open. The lot was silent, empty, but her pulse thudded with the certainty that the place still breathed. Back in her car, she drove farther down 2801, tracing the other motels listed in the files. Most were abandoned, boarded up with warped plywood. One had burned down, its skeletal frame still blackened against the horizon. Each stop felt the same, hollow, expectant. She parked outside the last of them, the Hillview Lodge, shuttered since 2001. Rainwater dripped from its sagging awning, pooling on the cracked pavement. Claire sat in the car, headlights off, staring at the building. The windows were dark, but something about them felt watchful, like a row of eyes. Her phone vibrated in her lap. A text. Leave the past buried, or you'll join them. Her skin went cold. The message was from an unknown number, time-stamped just seconds ago. She twisted in her seat, scanning the empty lot. No cars, no movement. Just her and the silent motel. But someone was here. Someone close enough to know she had stopped. Claire gripped the wheel, forcing her breath steady. She wasn't just chasing shadows anymore. The web was still alive, its threads vibrating. And now she was caught in it. Back at her apartment, long past midnight, she pored over the files again, the text still glowing in her mind. Leave the past buried. But the past wasn't buried. It was bleeding. She thought of the Halverson children, Tyler stumbling in the dark, Emily carried half asleep. She thought of Marlene, bribed into silence. Douglas Kerr, silenced with a forged receipt. Deputy Keene, haunted by a glance in the rain. And now her. She pressed her palms flat against the table, grounding herself. The motel wasn't just a place. It was a ritual. A cycle that consumed families, erased them, then waited for the next. But something had cracked. Receipts resurfacing, witnesses breaking silence, photographs delivered like offerings. Someone wanted her to follow. Someone else wanted her to stop. She stared at the photo of the man in the cap. His face blurred, indistinct, yet constant across decades. And for the first time, she wondered if he was just one man at all. Claire woke with the taste of iron in her mouth, though she hadn't been dreaming. She sat at her kitchen table, slumped over files, pen still in her hand. The lamp burned low, casting the papers in a jaundiced light. For a moment, she thought the knocking was in her head. Then it came again. 3 sharp raps at her door. Her body tensed. She slid silently from her chair, gun already drawn from the side drawer. She padded across the hardwood floor, heart pounding, and pressed her eye to the peephole. Empty hallway. Another knock, softer this time. She flung the door open. Nothing. Just silence. The faint hum of the building's pipes. But when she looked down, there was another envelope. Her hands shook as she scooped it up and retreated inside, locking the door. She ripped the flap open. Inside were 5 receipts, neatly stacked. Each bore a different name. Each belonged to one of the families she had already linked. Halloway, the mother and child, the college student, the Halversons, and one she didn't recognize. Name, McCaffrey. Date, March 2000. Motel, Hillview Lodge. Claire's throat tightened. The Hillview Lodge. The last shuttered motel she had visited just the night before. She whispered the name aloud. McCaffrey. The motel circuit had claimed another family, one that had never even been filed in her database, erased so thoroughly they didn't exist except for a slip of paper, and someone had just delivered the proof to her door. By morning, Ruiz sat stiffly in her office chair, the stack of receipts in front of him. His face was pale. "Detective, whoever's feeding you these wants you to keep going. They're not threatening, they're guiding." Claire rubbed her temples. "Or baiting." "Why you?" Ruiz asked quietly. She didn't answer. The truth was clawing at her already, because she was the one still digging, the one stubborn enough to chase ghosts, maybe the one reckless enough. Instead, she said, "We find the McCaffreys. Check census, tax records, school enrollments. See if anyone by that name disappeared in 2000. Ruiz nodded, already dialing. That afternoon, Claire drove to the county records office. The fluorescent-lit basement smelled of mildew and old paper. Rows of cabinets stretched into shadow. The clerk, a gaunt woman with readers perched low on her nose, wheeled a cart to Claire's table. "McCaffrey, you said?" Claire nodded. "Here." The clerk handed over a manila file thick with brittle documents. Inside, Patrick and Ellen McCaffrey. 2 children, Leah and Jonah. Last address listed in Austin, 1999. Tax filing ceased in 2000, no further records. It was like watching a candle snuff itself out. The family simply ended. Claire stared at the children's school photos. Leah with missing front teeth, Jonah holding a soccer ball. They had been real, vibrant. Now they were names on paper tied to a motel receipt no one else had seen. The storm pressed heavier against her chest. This wasn't just a case. It was a graveyard built from silence. She returned home after dusk. The hallway smelled faintly of fried onions from a neighbor's kitchen. As she fumbled with her keys, a prickle ran down her neck. The door to her apartment stood ajar. Her gun was in her hand before she breathed. She pushed the door open silently. Inside, the air felt wrong. Too still. The files she had left on the table were gone. The corkboard bare. Even the photographs of the Halversons stripped from their pins. Her stomach lurched. Footsteps echoed from the bedroom. Claire raised her weapon, voice sharp. "Police! Step out now." Silence. She edged forward, every nerve screaming. The bedroom door was open, the window beyond it cracked. Curtains stirred in the night breeze. She swept the room. Empty. On the bed lay a single sheet of paper, another receipt. McCaffrey, Hillview Lodge. Room 12. Claire's hands trembled. Whoever had been here hadn't come to harm her. They had come to leave her something. in the most intimate violation possible. Her sanctuary had been entered, her case stolen, her fear confirmed. The motel's web wasn't just history. It was alive, feeding, and it had found her. At sunrise, Ruiz met her outside the Hillview Lodge. Police tape fluttered in the breeze, though no active investigation stood guard. The motel's boarded windows gaped like blind eyes. "You sure about this?" Ruiz asked, scanning the sagging roofline. Claire nodded grimly, holding up the receipt. Room 12. They pried the door open with crowbars. The stale air inside smelled of rot and mildew. Dust motes swirled in the beam of their flashlights. The room was stripped bare except for a broken dresser and stained carpet. Claire's beam swept across peeling wallpaper, over graffiti scrawled in black marker. Her light caught something. On the far wall, above the headboard's outline, words had been carved into plaster with something sharp. "We stayed here. We didn't leave." Ruiz muttered a prayer under his breath. Claire reached out and traced the grooves with her gloved fingers. They were deep, furious. The McCaffreys hadn't vanished silently. They had screamed into the walls, and no one had listened. The carved words lingered in Claire's mind all night. "We stayed here. We didn't leave." She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the phrase burning against the dark like graffiti on her own thoughts. Whoever had scratched it into the wall had wanted someone, anyone, to find it. It wasn't just desperation. It was testimony. And now, decades later, that testimony had reached her. She rose before dawn, restless. Her apartment felt unsafe since the break-in. Every creak of the floorboard sent her pulse spiking. She brewed coffee she didn't drink, stared at files that weren't there anymore, and finally drove back to the Hillview Lodge as the first pale light crawled across the horizon. The lot was empty. The motel sat hunched against the morning, its paint bleached gray, its roof sagging like a broken back. She stepped inside room 12 again, flashlight beam sweeping the carved words. She crouched, studying the floorboards. In the corner, a loose plank creaked beneath her hand. She pried it up carefully. Inside the gap was a folded piece of paper, brittle with age. Her breath caught as she unfolded it. A child's handwriting. "My name is Leah. If you find this, we didn't leave. Please tell my grandma in Austin." Claire's throat closed. Leah McCaffrey, the little girl in the school photo. The note had survived 2 decades in silence, waiting for someone stubborn enough to look. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, jolting her back to the present. A text. Unknown number again. "You're digging in graves that aren't yours." Stop. She stared at the screen, Leah's note still trembling in her hand. Whoever was sending these messages knew exactly what she was finding. And they were close. Too close. By midday, Ruiz had tracked down Ellen McCaffrey's surviving sister, a woman named Carol living in Dallas, gray-haired now, her hands twisted by arthritis. Claire drove out to meet her. The house was modest, garden overgrown, but Carol's eyes were sharp as she opened the door. "You're the first police to come knocking in 20 years, she said bitterly. Claire sat with her at the kitchen table, the air thick with the smell of lemon cleaner. "I believe your sister and her family disappeared from the Hillview Lodge in 2000. I found this." She slid the note across. Carol's hands trembled as she read it. Tears welled in her eyes. "That's Leah's handwriting. I'd know it anywhere." Her voice broke. "I begged the police back then. They told me my sister had probably run off, started a new life, but I knew Ellen. She wouldn't. She couldn't. She loved those kids too much." Claire's chest tightened. "Did anyone ever contact you afterward? Threats? Warnings?" Carol hesitated. Then she nodded. "There was a phone call. A man's voice, calm, polite. He told me to stop asking questions, said Ellen had chosen to leave, and then He quoted Leah's birthday to me. The exact day. How would he know that? Claire's pulse raced. Do you remember his name? Carol shook her head. No, but he had this flat way of talking, like he was reading lines off a page driving back toward Austin. Claire couldn't shake the image of Leah crouched in that motel room, scratching words into plaster, hiding a note beneath the floor. The terror it must have taken, the hope, and yet the system had held. Receipts planted, records erased, threats delivered, families silenced. Her phone buzzed again. You're not listening. Stop now. Last warning. Her grip tightened on the wheel. She could almost feel eyes on her from the cars passing, from the empty fields beyond the road. Whoever was behind this wasn't just watching. They were circling closer. She pressed harder on the gas. That night, her apartment no longer felt like a refuge. She locked every bolt, checked every window. Still, unease clung to her. Near midnight, she heard it, the faint scrape of metal at her door. She froze, gun in hand, listening. A shadow flickered under the gap at the threshold. Then silence. Her phone buzzed again. A photo, taken from inside her hallway. The angle showed her own apartment door. She swallowed hard, finger tightening on the trigger. Whoever it was had stood just outside, camera pressed to the wood, as if daring her to open it. She stayed awake until dawn, weapon never leaving her hand. The motel wasn't just reaching out from the past. It was alive, hunting in the present. And now it was hunting her. The morning light did little to erase the memory of the shadow at her door. Claire drove to the station on adrenaline and black coffee, every mirror check laced with suspicion. Ruiz was waiting, concern etched across his face. You look like hell. They were at my apartment, Claire said, dropping her phone on the desk. She pulled up the photo, her own door, captured from the hallway. Ruiz's jaw clenched. That's a line crossed. Claire nodded. We can't treat this like history anymore. It's happening now. Someone's making sure the motel never dies. She laid Leah's note on the table beside the stack of receipts. The McCaffreys didn't vanish. They were taken. Like the Halversons, like the others. And whoever's sending me these warnings knows every detail. Ruiz tapped the receipts. So we hunt the messenger. Start with Mid-South Services. Someone kept those motels under their control. Find the money, we find the hand. They spent the day buried in paper trails, following ghost companies that split and dissolved like smoke. Mid-South Services had been bought out in 2001 by another shell, Lone Star Maintenance. Then that dissolved into two more. Always the same signatures, always the same P.O. boxes. Finally, a name surfaced, Victor Carnes, listed as director on a 1999 filing. The signature was blocky, deliberate. Claire felt her chest tighten. Carn. Ruiz frowned. Ring a bell? She shook her head slowly. Only that it feels wrong. Like I've heard it whispered, they dug deeper. Carnes had no social security number on file, no credit history, no property deeds. Just a name, a phantom dressed in bureaucracy. That night, Claire refused to go home. She rented a room at a chain hotel on the city's edge, paying in cash. Habit more than safety. She sat at the small desk, files spread before her, the hum of the vending machine outside the only sound. She was halfway through rereading the McCaffrey file when a knock came at her door. Her breath froze. Room service, a voice called. She hadn't ordered food. Her gun was in her hand before she rose. She moved to the door, keeping to the wall. Wrong room, she called back. Silence. Then a chuckle, low and unsettling. Footsteps retreating down the hall. Her phone buzzed. A text. Even when you hide, we find you. Her pulse thundered. She yanked the curtains back. Down in the parking lot, a man leaned against a dented sedan, head tilted toward her window. A baseball cap shadowed his face. Her blood ran cold. The man from the photo. The man in the cap. She grabbed her phone, snapping a picture through the glass. But when she blinked, the space was empty. The car gone. By morning, exhaustion weighed her down, but adrenaline pushed her through. She met Ruiz again, photo in hand. "That's him," she said. "The same man near the Halversons." The same blurred figure in every story. Ruiz studied the photo. "And now, he's following you." Claire leaned closer. "Not just following. He wants me to know he's there. Whoever Carnes is, whoever runs this, he's not a ghost. He's flesh. And he's watching." She shoved Leah's note back into its evidence sleeve. "If he's bold enough to show himself, then we're getting close." Too close. Ruiz's voice was low. "Close to what, detective?" Claire met his gaze, her own steady despite the fear crawling beneath her ribs. "To whatever's been swallowing families for 30 years, and to the people who built it." That evening, she drove south again, drawn back to the ruins of the Red Oak Motel. The lot was empty, just gravel and weeds, but her headlights swept across something new. A car, parked exactly where the Halversons' SUV had been found in 1997. She killed the engine and sat in silence, heart hammering. The car was an older model sedan, silver paint dulled with age. On the windshield, tucked under the wiper, fluttered a slip of paper. She stepped out slowly, gun in hand, every nerve screaming. She approached the car, the gravel crunching under her boots. She tugged the paper free. Another receipt. McCaffrey, Hillview Lodge. Signed, Leah. Her vision blurred. The little girl's name, written in the same uneven script as the note under the floorboard. She spun, scanning the empty lot, the shadows at its edges. "Where are you?" she whispered into the dark. The wind carried no answer, but in the silence, she felt it. The motel's grip tightening, the web drawing her in. And somewhere, just beyond the circle of her headlights, someone was watching. Claire kept the receipt clenched in her hand all the way back to Austin. Leah's name scrawled across it burned hotter than the dashboard lights. A little girl's handwriting resurrected after 20 years, or forged by someone who knew exactly how to twist the knife. By the time she pulled into the station, Ruiz was pacing outside. "You said urgent," he called as she stepped out. She shoved the paper into his hand. "Found this on a car parked where the Halversons were last seen. Signed by Leah McCaffrey." Ruiz's face drained of color. "That can't be." "I know," Claire cut him off. "Either it's a forgery, or Leah didn't die when they said she did." Ruiz glanced around the parking lot uneasily. "Detective, whoever's doing this is getting bolder. They're not just leaving breadcrumbs, they're playing with you." Claire's jaw tightened. "Then it's time we stop following crumbs and go after the hand that drops them." They dug deeper into Victor Carnes. The name circled like a ghost in every motel file, but now cracks appeared. A land deed in Waco, signed by Carnes in 1995, listed a witness, Dean LaSalle, a real person, a former notary. Claire tracked him to a retirement complex outside Temple. He was frail, oxygen tube looped under his nose, but his eyes sharpened when she showed her badge. "Carnes?" His voice rasped. "Yes, I remember him. Tall, thin, always wore a cap indoors. He had this way of making you feel like he was already 3 steps ahead of you." "What did he do?" Claire asked. LaSalle coughed into a tissue. "Said he was a contractor. Paid cash for everything, but the men with him, they weren't workers. They were handlers. Watched everything." "Never spoke handlers?" Claire pressed. LaSalle nodded. "The kind of men who could make a problem vanish." His eyes watered. "I shouldn't even be telling you this. They warned me once." Claire leaned forward. "Warned you how?" He tugged at the oxygen tube with shaking fingers. "I found a receipt in my mailbox. Gasoline. Same date I'd notarized for him. But it wasn't mine. It had my signature on it anyway. Claire's pulse spiked. The same calling card. The same weapon of silence. She left LaSalle trembling in his chair, but his words dug deep. Carnes wasn't just a phantom. He was flesh, with a network of watchers and enforcers. A ritual of receipts that bound people into silence. That night, Claire drove back to her hotel room, nerves wound tight. She checked the locks twice before sitting down at the desk. Files spread across the surface. She traced the pattern. Motels, maintenance contracts, disappearances. Her eyes blurred from fatigue. She rubbed them, leaned back. A sound froze her, the faint click of her door unlocking. Her gun was in her hand before she breathed. She crouched by the wall, heart slamming against her ribs. The knob turned slowly. The door swung open. A figure slipped inside, tall, shoulders stooped beneath a cap. Claire raised her gun. "Police! Don't move!" The man froze in the doorway, shadow hiding his face. Then a voice, low and almost amused. "Detective!" Her stomach dropped. The same voice she had heard in Carol McCaffrey's story. Calm, flat, rehearsed. "Carnes," she whispered. He chuckled softly. "Names are fluid. But yes, you've found me." Her finger tightened on the trigger. "Hands where I can see them." He raised them slowly. His silhouette was lean, wiry. The cap shadowed most of his face, but his mouth twisted into a faint smile. "You've been diligent," he said. "Most give up when they get the first receipt. You, though, you keep digging. It's admirable. Dangerous, but admirable. What did you do to the Halversons?" "The McCaffreys?" He tilted his head, as though considering. "Do you believe in graves, detective? Some are shallow, some are deep. The trick is knowing which to fill." Her skin crawled. "Where are they?" Carnes stepped farther into the room. "Closer than you think, but if I told you, you wouldn't stop, and we can't have that." Before she could react, movement exploded at her side. Another figure lunged from the bathroom, heavy, fast. The gun was knocked from her grip. She slammed against the dresser, breath crushed from her lungs. A hand clamped over her mouth. The man's breath reeked of cigarettes and sweat. Carnes stepped forward calmly, retrieving the gun. "Sleep now, detective," he murmured. A cloth pressed over her face. Bitter fumes flooded her nose. Her vision tunneled, body going slack. The last thing she saw was Carnes's faint smile under the brim of his cap. She woke in darkness. The air smelled of mold and gasoline. Her wrists were bound behind her with rough cord. She lay on a carpet soiled and sticky. Slowly, her eyes adjusted. She was in a motel room, the wallpaper peeling, the buzzing of a failing fluorescent light overhead. Room 12, Hillview Lodge. The carved words stared at her from the wall. "We stayed here. We didn't leave." A shadow moved in the corner. Carnes, seated in a chair, watching her. "Now," he said softly, "you understand." The buzzing light overhead flickered, throwing the room in and out of shadow. Claire tested the cords at her wrists, skin already raw. They held firm, biting into her flesh. Carnes sat in the chair across the room, hat brim shadowing his eyes. A cigarette burned between his fingers, the smoke curling into lazy shapes. "You don't look surprised," he said, voice calm as always. "I expected worse," Claire muttered, keeping her tone flat, even as fear prickled at her skin. He smiled faintly. "That's because you haven't seen it yet." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Do you know why the receipts matter?" Claire didn't answer. "They're proof," he said. "Proof of presence. Proof of absence. Paper doesn't lie. People do. You'd be amazed how quickly the world forgets a family once the paper says they were never there." His voice was steady, almost soothing. That flat, rehearsed tone again. Claire swallowed. "You forged them." "Forged?" He chuckled. "No, detective. Authored. We write the story people believe. If the receipt says you bought gas, you did. If the motel slip says you checked out, you left. If the restaurant tab has your name, you ate. It doesn't matter where your body is. Paper is the truth now. He stubbed out the cigarette, stood, and moved toward her. His presence filled the room, not through size, but through certainty. "You're clever," he said. "You followed the trail farther than anyone else. But cleverness cuts both ways." He crouched, close enough she could see the pale lines of scars across his jaw. "So tell me, why shouldn't you disappear too?" Her pulse thundered, but she forced herself to meet his gaze. "Because you need me." His brows lifted slightly under the cap. "Do I? You've been leaving me clues. Receipts, notes. You could have silenced me weeks ago, but you didn't. You wanted me to follow." For the first time, the faintest crack appeared in his calm. His smile faltered. She pressed. "Someone wants this story told. Maybe not you. Maybe someone close to you. Whoever planted Leah's note under the floorboards. They wanted it found. And you know it, Silence." Carnes straightened slowly. "Careful, detective." But the hesitation in his voice told her she was right. Hours bled by. The buzzing light hummed. Carnes eventually left, locking the door behind him. Claire twisted against the cords until her wrists screamed. The chair creaked beneath her. A sound drew her still, a shuffle from the bathroom. Her heart leapt. "Who's there?" she whispered. A shadow emerged, slight, hesitant. A young woman, hair long and tangled, eyes distant. She moved like someone half asleep. Claire's breath caught. "Leah?" The girl blinked. Her lips parted, but no words came. She looked older than the school photo, early 20s, but her face bore the same shape, the same scar above her eyebrow. It was her, alive. Claire's chest constricted. "I found your note. I'm here to help." Leah tilted her head as if the words were foreign. Then she whispered, voice thin and cracked. "He said you'd join us." Her eyes darted to the door, fear flashing. She stepped closer and, with trembling fingers, slid something into Claire's bound hands, a shard of glass. Then she retreated silently, vanishing back into the bathroom shadows. Claire's throat tightened. Leah was alive, broken, terrified, but alive. And she'd just given Claire a chance. She worked the shard against the cords until her wrists bled. Every minute stretched long, punctuated by the sound of footsteps passing outside, voices murmuring low. Finally, the rope snapped. She pulled her arms free, skin raw, muscles shaking. She slipped to the window, pried the warped frame open an inch at a time. The night air hit her face like a shock. Headlights swept across the lot, a vehicle pulling up. She froze. Carnes stepped out, flanked by two men. One carried something slung over his shoulder, a heavy duffel bag that clanked with metal. They were preparing something. Claire slid back into the shadows. She had no gun, no radio, just the shard of glass slick with her blood. But she wasn't done. Not while Leah was alive. Carnes entered minutes later, setting a battered briefcase on the dresser. His men dropped the duffel with a dull thud. Tools rattled inside. He turned toward the bathroom. "Leah, come out!" Claire's muscles tensed. The girl stepped forward, eyes blank, movements mechanical. Carnes rested a hand on her shoulder. "She's obedient now," he said softly. "Years teach obedience. That's why the story never leaves the motel. The paper says she's gone. The girl says nothing. Perfect symmetry." Claire's voice cut through the silence. "She left a note." Carnes's head snapped toward her. For the first time, anger flared in his eyes. "She remembered," Claire pressed. "Even after everything, she fought you. And she gave me this." She held up the glass shard, glinting in the buzzing light. Karn's jaw tightened. He took a step forward, and the motel door exploded inward. Shouts, flashlights, officers pouring into the room, weapons raised. "Police! Drop it!" Chaos erupted. Karnes spun, hand diving for the briefcase. One of his men lunged, tackled an officer. Shots rang out. Claire dove low, grabbing Leah's arm, pulling her toward the window. "Come on!" Leah stumbled but followed, eyes wide with terror. Behind them, Karn's voice rose above the chaos. "You think paper lies? Paper is forever." Claire shoved Leah through the window, glass shattering around them. They hit the ground outside as sirens wailed and gunfire cracked. She pulled Leah to her feet, heart hammering. They were out, alive. But Karn's wasn't finished, and the motel still stood, buzzing and breathing like a beast in the night. The gunfire from room 12 still echoed in Claire's ears as she dragged Leah across the gravel lot. Sirens wailed louder, red and blue lights painting the sagging walls of the Hillview Lodge. Officers shouted commands, boots pounding, the scene a blur of chaos. But one thing was clear. Karn's was still inside. Claire ducked behind a rusting dumpster, her chest heaving. Leah clung to her arm, eyes wide and vacant, but when Claire whispered, "You're safe now," the girl nodded faintly, the first sign of recognition. "Stay here," Claire urged. "Don't move. Do you understand?" Leah's lips trembled, but she whispered, "Yes." Claire squeezed her shoulder and rose, moving back toward the motel. Inside, the air reeked of gunpowder and mold. A body lay near the doorway, one of Karn's men, blood pooling beneath him. Officers advanced cautiously down the narrow hall, weapons raised. "Detective!" Ruiz's voice cut through the noise. He appeared from the shadows, vest strapped tight, pistol steady. "You shouldn't be in here." "He's still inside," Claire said. "Karnes. He won't go quietly." Ruiz grimaced but nodded. "Then we finish this." They advanced together, past peeling wallpaper and buzzing lights. Every door seemed to breathe. The motel felt alive, as though it had been waiting for this moment all along. From the end of the hall, Karn's voice floated out, calm as ever. "You think you've saved her, Detective? Paper still tells the story, and the paper says they're gone." Claire gritted her teeth. "Come out, Karns." "It's over." Silence, then a sharp crash, the sound of a window shattering. They sprinted to the final room. The window hung open, curtains flapping in the night air. The briefcase was gone, but carved into the wall above the bed were fresh words, gouged deep with something sharp. "You can't erase the author." Outside, chaos swirled. Officers fanned out across the lot, radios crackling. A trail of blood led toward the tree line. Claire and Ruiz followed, flashlights cutting into the dark. Branches snapped underfoot. The night smelled of cedar and smoke. Ahead, the beam caught movement. Karn staggered through the undergrowth, cap gone, face pale and streaked with blood from a graze at his temple. The briefcase banged against his leg with every step. "Victor Karnes!" Ruiz shouted. "Stop!" Karnes turned, eyes wild now, no trace of the calm mask. He raised a pistol, firing blindly into the trees. Bullets tore bark inches from Claire's head. She and Ruiz dropped low, returning fire. Karnes stumbled deeper, shouting into the night. "They'll forget her! They'll forget all of them! Paper is forever!" His voice cracked into manic laughter. They cornered him at the edge of a dry creek bed. His pistol clicked empty, but he still clutched the briefcase to his chest like scripture. Claire leveled her weapon. "It's over." He shook his head slowly. "You don't understand. Without me, the story unravels. Without me, there's no record, no truth, only chaos." "Then let it unravel," she said. He opened the briefcase with a trembling hand. Inside were stacks of receipts, bound with rubber bands, aged and yellowing. Each bore names she recognized: Halverson, McCaffrey, Halloway. and dozens more she didn't. He scattered them into the creek bed like ashes. Papers fluttered into the dark, landing in the mud, in the weeds, carried by the wind. "Proof!" he screamed. "Proof they were never here! Proof they don't exist!" Claire stepped forward, steady. "No, Carnes. Proof that you did this. Every last one is evidence, and it ends tonight." He lunged for her, wild-eyed, swinging the empty pistol like a club. She fired once. The shot echoed through the trees. Carnes crumpled, collapsing among the scattered receipts. His blood soaked the paper, blurring names into red smears. The forest went still. Hours later, the motel lot was a sea of flashing lights. Forensics teams sifted through the rooms, bagging receipts, photographing the carvings on the walls. Leah sat wrapped in a blanket near an ambulance, medics checking her pulse. Claire approached slowly, crouching beside her. "It's over," she said gently. Leah's eyes flicked up, still haunted but sharper now. "You found me," she whispered. Claire's throat tightened. "I did." Behind them, Ruiz watched silently, the weight of the night heavy on his shoulders. "We'll need weeks to process all this," he said. "Maybe months. But with these receipts, with Leah alive, we can tie it all together." Every family, every disappearance, Claire nodded, but her eyes stayed on Leah. The motel loomed in the background, boarded windows and rotting wood glowing under the harsh police floodlights. For the first time, it looked smaller. Not dead, not gone, but broken. The story wasn't finished, but the silence had finally been shattered. The Hillview Lodge was torn down 3 months later. Claire stood with Ruiz at the edge of the lot as the final wall collapsed under the weight of the bulldozer's claw. Dust rose in a gray plume, scattering into the sunlight. Where once the rooms had whispered, there was only rubble. Still, as she watched the debris settle, Claire couldn't shake the feeling that the silence wasn't victory. It was mourning. The case files multiplied by the week. Forensics uncovered dozens of forged receipts hidden in Carnes' briefcase. Some tied to missing families long forgotten. Others bore names no one recognized. Every scrap of paper was treated like gold, cataloged, cross-referenced, checked against old police records. Some matched open cases. Some matched families who had quietly given up. Some had no records at all, suggesting there were victims whose disappearances had never been reported. Claire spent her evenings surrounded by stacks of manila folders, piecing together lives from paper scraps. But the work was heavy. Every receipt wasn't just evidence. It was testimony, a record of erasure. Leah was placed in a long-term care facility. The doctors said she suffered from dissociative withdrawal, a protective shell forged over years of captivity. She rarely spoke, rarely ate without prompting. But she responded to gentle voices, to music, to the sight of her grandmother Carol. Claire visited often. Sometimes Leah stared past her as if she wasn't there. Other times, her eyes flicked to Claire's badge, her lips forming the faintest trace of a word. Safe. The first time she said it aloud, Claire had to leave the room, tears stinging her eyes. One evening, Ruiz brought her coffee at the station. He set it on her desk without a word, watching her sift through yet another box of receipts. "You're still carrying it," he said finally. Claire looked up. "What?" "The motel. Carnes. All of it. You're carrying it like it's yours alone." She exhaled slowly. "If we hadn't found Leah, if we hadn't stopped him, those families would still be names on paper, and that's all they'd ever be." Ruiz leaned against the desk. "We stopped him. We broke the silence. That has to count." Claire glanced down at the receipt she held. Faded ink. A signature blurred with time. She thought of Carnes scattering them into the creek bed. Laughing, that paper was forever. "Counts," she said softly. "But it doesn't close it." Months later, Claire stood before a small memorial in Austin. Names carved into granite. Families lost. Families found. Her fingers traced Leah's name, not as a memorial, but as recognition. Alive. A survivor. She closed her eyes, hearing the echo of the words carved into the motel wall. We stayed here. We didn't leave. Now, finally, someone had listened. Claire stepped back, letting the autumn wind wash across her face. She wasn't naive. There were still receipts missing, still stories untold, still graves too deep to unearth. But the silence had been broken. The motel's story was no longer its own. It belonged to the world now. As she walked away, the setting sun bathed the memorial in gold. The city hummed around her, ordinary and alive. And for the first time in years, Claire felt something close to peace. Not because the darkness was gone, but because the truth had finally been seen.